The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
New Orleans Saints quarterback Spencer Rattler won the starting job by checking 3 boxes.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast.
I want to tell you exactly how it is that it sounds like Spencer Rattler won the starting job based on some of the comments from head coach Kellen Moore when he announced on Tuesday who the starting quarterback would be for the beginning of the season. And I think that it's because he checked 3 different boxes: experience, confidence, consistency. So I want to roll through each of those things and explain to you where I think and how I think he ended up checking those 3 boxes, why they were important, and how it led to this moment where Spencer Rattler earned the New Orleans Saints starting quarterback job. Let's start off with experience. Yes, he's had 6 NFL starts last year back in 2024. All 6 of those were losses. All 7 of his appearances were losses, but I do think that that's a part of the experience factor. 6 games started, 7 games played, having to play with a variety of different talent, all the way from starter to backup to reserve to guy just off the street in some cases. And I do think that navigating that level of adversity is in and of itself a level of experience, but it goes beyond the NFL days as well. Let's go back to college for both Spencer Rattler and for Tyler Shough. Yes, Tyler Shough spent more years in college than Spencer Rattler, but Spencer Rattler saw more offensive snaps and more passing attempts as well. So I do think that experience was a big thing that checked the box for when it came to Kellen Moore and making his decision. And he said as much. He mentioned the experience of Spencer Rattler, not just the experience, but the ability of bouncing back from and managing adversity. He said that a lot, that he wasn't necessarily put in the best of positions, that he has dealt with some things, all of that goes to factor towards experience. It's not just playing experience. It's also the experience of navigating a tough situation. This is a New Orleans Saints team that is going into 2025 with a brand new offense, a brand new defense, brand new head coach, brand new defensive coordinator, new play callers on both sides of the football, a new quarterback, a new offensive system, and a new defensive system. There's a lot of adversity that could be on the way as this team goes through the growing pains that Tyler Shough has highlighted in recent interviews himself. And so going with a guy that has already begun to navigate and show that he can navigate those growing pains, that is a level of experience that I'm sure was very appealing to Kellen Moore. Let's take a look at confidence next. Confidence comes in a bunch of different kind of shapes and sizes. So I'm going to highlight 2 things in particular. Confidence in terms of decision-making. We saw that being a big thing that Spencer Rattler took a large leap in going from 2024, where, for instance, oftentimes he held the ball a little bit too long, got him into some pressure situations and trouble when it came to opposing pass rushes, things like that. But then he got into this first training camp, and the first thing we saw at the very beginning of training camp from him was how much more decisive he was, how much more aggressive he was, how much more confident he simply was, and how quickly he moved through his progressions. When he made a decision, he went after it, all of those pieces. So there's that level of it as well. But there's also kind of the bounce back side of it. Spencer Rattler had a habit during training camp where any time that he had a negative play, he would almost always follow it up with something that made you go either ooh or ah, and sometimes both ooh and ah. But jokes aside, like him being able to bounce back from that, you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars game. What happened right before he leads this hurry up tempo 2-minute drive to get within 2 and then tie the game with the 2-point conversion? And interception gets thrown on a quick slant that he was trying to go to. Now, Mason Tipton has kind of owned the fault of why that interception happened, needing to push harder, play through the corner, all those other things. So Mason Tipton has kind of borne the brunt of that a little bit. But Spencer Rattler has talked about it from him too. It's an RPO. You got to get the ball out quickly, because otherwise, if you don't, you've got illegal men downfield. So he gets the ball out, it gets intercepted. But instead of him kind of sulking in that or not being able to bounce back from that, he does bounce back from it. He leads this game-tying drive that turned a loss into a preseason tie in the exhibition where there is no overtime, Ross. And so being able to kind of figure out, or being able to bounce back from that moment, shows you a level of confidence there as well. But I do think that the confidence on the field mostly kind of showed through his decision making, his aggressiveness, his willingness to attack and be aggressive out on the football field. That was something that stood out to us the very first time that we saw him out on the field during this 2025 training camp. And that remained all the way through training camp, which brings me to my final point. And the final one of the other things that Kellen Moore highlighted, which was consistency. It was actually the first thing that he highlighted about him. He talked about how Spencer Rattler is going to be the job. He has been so consistent throughout training camp. Like those two things were almost back to back with one another during the announcement on Tuesday. And I think that the consistency can be seen both in sort of the observation of the eye test, but also through the numbers, right? If you add up all of his 7-on-7 passes in training camp, his training camp passes, his team drill passes in training camp, as well as his passes and completions from the preseason, he completed just over 70% of all of those passes. That is a level of consistency that I do think is something that you as a head coach would be willing to take, first of all, because 70% completion percentage in any game is really, really good. But doing that over the course of an entire summer just shows a level of consistency. Now, remember that keeps in that number includes things like I said, 7-on-7s where there's no pass rush and stuff like that. So it is what it is. But look, you take those same numbers and you go 7-on-7s, you go team drills, and you go preseason, and Tyler Shuck is not in the 70% range. Tyler Shuck didn't perform poorly by any stretch of the imagination, and I cannot stress that enough. It's actually one of the big reasons why I'm harping on the word earned for Spencer Rattler, because it feels very much like he earned this job, not that Tyler Shuck lost the starting role, right? It always felt like it was Spencer Rattler's to lose in the first place. He did not lose it, nor did Tyler Shuck, but Spencer Rattler walks away with it because he absolutely earned it. And I think that these three things tell you that: experience, confidence, consistency. And I'll mention one other thing too that I think came to the mind of Kellen Moore very quickly during that press conference on Tuesday, where it was also the mobility, right? His ability to be able to make plays, not just with his arm, but with his feet, as Kellen Moore said. I do think that there is a value in each of these quarterbacks, really, Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler. But with Spencer Rattler not being hindered by not being able to bring this, I do think that there's a value that comes with him, his ability to be able to make plays with his legs, obviously something that Kellen Moore likes. So experience, confidence, consistency, those feel like the qualities that led to Spencer Rattler becoming the starting quarterback.
August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. Perhaps you believe the Green Bay Packers are going to win the Super Bowl this year, or maybe you have a division winner, dark horse, you'd like to parlay. Maybe the Broncos and the Seahawks. You'd get some juicy odds on that if you wanted to do it. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bet now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast.
We got to look at the waiver wire, because the Tennessee Titans are number one in the waiver wire. And I've explained this before, but if you're new and you haven't heard me explain it, the waiver wire in the NFL does not work like your fantasy league. You don't get to acquire one guy and then you go to the back of the list. The Titans finished last in the NFL last year. That means they are number one in the waiver wire all the way until week 4 of the NFL season. And it doesn't work where you pick up one guy, you claim one guy and go to the back of the list. The Titans can claim as many of these players if they want. If the Titans wanted to claim 30 players, they could claim all 30, and they would have the right to claim them before any other team. The Titans have right of first refusal for any player that is on waivers. And again, any player that's played less than 4 years in the NFL hits the waiver wire. Anyone who's played longer immediately becomes a free agent. All right? So, like if the Titans cut Calvin Ridley today, he wouldn't go on waivers. He could just go sign with whatever team he wanted. But if the Titans cut Chimdike today, he goes on waivers. Do you guys see what I mean? Anyways, moving right along. Let's go position by position here. Running back. Running back is the most important spot right now. I think the Titans can add somebody with Tyjae Spears going on injured reserve and with Kal-El Mullings not only being a rookie, but also being banged up. You guys know I'm not very high on Julius Chestnut. Mr. August, the preseason superstar. I don't think that Julius Chestnut is an NFL running back that needs to be on the NFL roster. So, a couple of guys became available. Audric Estime played for Notre Dame. Huge, big-bodied power back, cut by the Denver Broncos. The Broncos have kind of a deep running back group, which is why a guy like Estime would be let go. But I just think that Estime is a perfect fit with what the Titans need. I said this on the Titans Squad show with Brad Hopkins and Julian Missinone. Tony Pollard is not thunder. Tony Pollard is lightning. Tony Pollard is a lightning-style back. Not a power back. Tony Pollard was a running back wide receiver in college. I think people forget that because of how physical he ran last year and what the Titans asked from Tony Pollard. But they need a power back to go with the lightning back that Tony Pollard is. And Estime is absolutely a power back that can run downhill. I think he's a better runner than Julius Chestnut. I think his skill set fits perfectly with Tony Pollard for the time being. And when Mullings comes back and when Spears comes back, you can just get rid of Estime if you need to. But I think Audric Estime makes a ton of sense. And Damian Martinez, Cam Ward's running back from Miami. I like Damian Martinez in the draft. Let me also say, Ollie Gordon looking awesome for the Miami Dolphins. And a bunch of us, me and a lot of you guys who listen to me, we were pining for Ollie Gordon at the end of the draft. And now he's going to be good for the Dolphins. Very sad. But with that being said, Damian Martinez is a guy that I liked late in the draft as a power back who knows Cam Ward and is comfortable with him. I think either of those guys, Audric Estime or Damian Martinez, could be really good waiver wire additions for the Titans. Also, Khalil Herbert, who Herbert isn't going to be a waiver wire guy, but I would take Khalil Herbert over both these guys instantly. I would just go ask Khalil Herbert if he wants to be the Titans' number 2 running back right now and get 10 carries a game. I would go get Khalil Herbert right away if I was the Titans. But since he's a free agent, not a waiver guy, he will have his pick. But those are names that I would focus on right away for the Titans because running back is a desperate need, in my opinion. Not only that, but wide receiver. We talked about the return possibilities for the Titans and why it was kind of a shocker that James Prochet was let go, considering the Titans don't have, another punt returner lined up. Well, what the Titans could have done is they could have seen a guy like Trey Palmer get cut by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they have so many. See, I've seen a lot of people say, why would we pick up all these dudes who got cut by other teams? They're obviously not good either. Guys, the Titans are the worst roster in the NFL. It is entirely likely that players 40 through 60 or 50 through 65 on a playoff team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Rams or the Ravens or something like that, it's incredibly possible that player 50 through 65 is better than the Titans 40 through 55. Like, this is the worst roster in the league. That's the point. So, yeah, these guys are being cut by other teams, but a lot of these guys are being cut by other teams that are better. And even if the entire roster isn't better, look at a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how much talent they have at wide receiver. They have Jalen McMillan and Emeka Egbuka and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Sterling Shepard. And now they had Trey Palmer. And, some teams just have really, really heavy position groups that have 7 or 8 guys who should be on NFL rosters. And then think about like the Titans linebacker group, where there's only 3 guys even worth it. There are some teams out there who have 5 or 6 linebackers who should be on NFL rosters, but they can't keep 5 or 6 guys on their roster. So don't be negative Nancy and be like, all these guys got cut, they suck anyway. That's an immature way of viewing it. Honestly, an uninformed way of understanding how roster management works in the NFL. But with that being said, Trey Palmer, the Titans could have cut James Prochet because they want to go get a wide receiver who's a better wide receiver, who's a bigger wide receiver, who also can return. Trey Palmer has 68 career punt returns. Trey Palmer has 60 career kick returns. Go out and get Trey Palmer, Tennessee Titans. Not a question about it. That should be a move that the Titans should make. Now, there are some other wide receivers who became available, like Deontay Johnson, Malachi Corley. Those guys are locker room cancers. We don't want Malachi Corley. We don't want Deontay Johnson. A lot of people know that Deontay Johnson is a crap teammate after he quit on the Ravens in the middle of the game and he's been bounced around. Most of the general public knows about Deontay Johnson now, but trust me when I tell you, you don't want Malachi Corley. He is a locker room cancer, a me guy. You do not want Malachi Corley. At tight end, bring in Greg Dulcich. Greg Dulcich, former high pick tight end for the Broncos, went to the Giants. I think he led the preseason in touchdown catches. He can be a perfect backup for Gunnar Helm. He's a similar type player. Gunnar Helm's a better blocker, and Dulcich is more of a pure receiver. But look at Cincinnati's offense. They have a guy like Mike Gesicki, who they can use as a matchup guy. Gunnar Helm is going to be that for the Titans, but without Josh Whyle on the team now, they don't have anybody else who can replicate that skill set. And DMR is very similar to Chigakonkwo. Well, now you get Greg Dulcich, who's kind of similar to Gunnar Helm, and now you have a backup for both, and you can continue to develop Dulcich as a player in your offense. I would love Greg Dulcich on the Titans. Jelani Woods, the big, huge 6'7" tight end for the Indianapolis Colts, he was cut. That's a different skill set too because he's so big and physical, which the Titans don't really have. That would be an interesting option also. On the offensive line, Javon Foster was cut by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Javon Foster out of Wake Forest. I liked him coming out of college, or it wasn't Wake Forest, it was Missouri. He could play right tackle. He could play left tackle. He had over 3,000 snaps in college. I would bring him in if the Titans are looking to add an offensive tackle and they like him better in year 2 than Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon. And former first-round pick for the Patriots, Cole Strange, was cut by the Patriots, obviously. Strange has not worked out. He's not a first-round pick. But as a long-term replacement for Lloyd Cushenberry, I think Bill Callahan could get the best out of Cole Strange. So I would be looking at that as a possibility. On the defensive side of the ball, at nose tackle, Shai Tuttle was cut by the New Orleans Saints. Isaiah Foskey the snowman, or Tuttle was cut by the Panthers and Foskey was cut by the Saints, but edge. Braden Swinson was cut by the Patriots. I loved Braden Swinson this year out of LSU. He's technically refined. He's 6'3". I would have been okay if the Titans picked Braden Swinson where they picked Femi Oladipo. Now, maybe that's a bad call on my part because Swinson ended up being, taken so much later in the process. He might have even gone undrafted. So there may be something going on there behind the scenes that we don't know about. But for the Titans edge rush group, to have a guy who's polished right away, who can balance out Femi's rawness, I would love to get Braden Swinson in here. Gabriel Murphy, I think Brennan Jackson from the Los Angeles Rams could be an option. Linebacker. Chad Mumma, cut by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I would bring him in as linebacker 4. Chris Paul, Pooh Paul from Ole Miss, who was just drafted. He was cut by, I think, the Rams. I would bring him in as linebacker 4 if the Titans are interested. And then finally in the secondary, at cornerback, Kobe Bryant from the Falcons, been a little banged up, but could be an option as a longer physical corner. Juju Brents, former second-round pick out of Kansas State, was cut by the Indianapolis Colts. The Titans took Darrell Baker off their hands and turned him into good depth. Go get Juju Brents and bring him in as depth for this cornerback room. He's an outside corner as well, which is what I think the Titans desperately need. Jalen Armour Davis, who is a former draft pick, 4th-round pick out of Alabama. He was cut by the Ravens. Again, the Ravens have a good, deep cornerback room. That's the type of big physical.
Colorado head coach Deion Sanders has officially named his starting quarterback.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes.
It's a decision that I think a lot of people saw coming. I don't know if everyone wanted to see this coming, right? I think a lot of people have the mindset where it's like, oh, Julian Lewis is the 5-star recruit that they brought in. And it's like, yes. That being said, Julian Lewis is probably a year away from being ready, or at least a few more months or weeks away, right? So the Buffs went with Caden Salter, the Liberty transfer, who coming off a year that saw him throw for 1,800 yards, 15 touchdowns. Wasn't a bad year, right? It wasn't his 2023 season where he threw for 32 touchdowns and threw for, I think it was 3,000 yards and rushed for another 12 and won Conference USA MVP, right? He took a step back last year. And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that he threw for 2,800 yards, 2,800 yards, 32 tuds, 6 picks, and 12 rushing touchdowns and 1,000 yards rushing. I think Caden Salter was the right pick, right? And I don't think Colorado brought Caden Salter in this offseason under the assumption that he wouldn't win the job, right? I think for the most part, it was his job to lose, and obviously he didn't lose it, right? Caden Salter is a veteran, multi-year starter. Colorado is trying to figure things out, right? They're going to have a new offensive line. They're going to have a new wide receiver core. They're going to have a new tight end, new play caller, or excuse me, same play caller, but new system. Because obviously it's going to be, I guess, how do you say this? They're going to not be able to just force feed Travis Hunter and force feed LeJohntay Wester, right? They're going to have to change things up. They don't know what they have yet. They have an idea of what they think they have, but they don't necessarily have an idea. And so, or they don't have like a definitive, like, this is who we have. So Caden Salter, first of all, I love the decision. I've been calling for him to be the starter the entire offseason. Again, I don't think this is a profound take by any means, but Colorado has had issues running the ball. I actually tweeted over at Locked On Buffs, so go check it out there. Caden Salter had 3, I think it was. Let me double check my own tweet so that way I don't forget. But Caden Salter had 400-yard plus rushing games in 2023. Colorado hasn't had a 100-yard rusher in a game since 2022, right? They haven't had a run game. They've had a iffy offensive line at best, right? They've been one of the worst offensive line units in college football for the past 2 years. And because, sorry, I was reading a comment there. Realistically, Caden Salter has the arm, he has the experience, has the mobility. And I think his dual threat ability takes this offense to another level. And I think it makes everyone's job easier, right? I think using Caden Salter's strengths, like his ability to run outside the pocket. I saw Scott Proctor wrote this today, but Caden Salter last season was a magician, or excuse me, in 2023 was a magician in the play action game. He in play action passes during 2023, he had 24 touchdowns to 1 interception, completed 65% of his passes. So not bad there. This past season, I'll give you guys a breakdown of sort of what he's been able to do, what he's good at. When he's kept clean, obviously most quarterbacks do really well. Drop backs 69.7% of the time, 63.8 completion percentage, 14 touchdowns, 2 picks, right? Play action last year wasn't nearly as effective. Maybe that was a schematic change for Liberty, but he only had 3 touchdowns. No play action. He had 12 of his 15 touchdowns. Passing depth. He completed 13 of 51 passes for 20 plus yards down the field. He's really, really good in the intermediate from 10 to 19 yards. He completed 57.1% of his passes for 691 yards. And all 3 of his interceptions came on deep passes. So clearly when he's trying to force the issue, maybe things get a little bit complicated. Not shocking. It is worth noting that 3 of his interceptions last season were deep and over the middle of the field. So clearly he's got to keep the ball. He's got to protect the ball, got to keep it in safe hands. So I think Deion Sanders said it perfectly, right? We all knew, if you kind of knew that anything about anything, right? He announced that Caden Salter was a starter, but he's like, you guys knew that already, right? And I think it was sort of this notion of like, we didn't bring him here. I don't know how much they paid him. We didn't pay him X amount of dollars, or we didn't promise him X amount of whatever for him to not start, right? And I think Julian Lewis knows that, part of his development is learning. And I think we're in an era where people just expect the shiny 5-star to start all the time. And that's not how it works, right? Caden Salter has a chance to lead Colorado to a Big 12 championship game. And I think he's going to cover up a lot of flaws like Shedeur did that this offensive unit has. And what those flaws are, we don't know yet. Is it that they don't have a good run game? Is it that this offensive line isn't the right solution, right? We've seen that before, right? We thought last year where they brought in Tyler Johnson, Khalil Benson, Yakiri Walker, and you name it. They brought Justin Mayers, and it was like, okay, this is a good unit. This unit's going to be the difference. And it was like, no, that unit was still bad. So we don't necessarily know what Colorado's weaknesses are. That being said, having Caden Salter, it changes everything for this offense, right? You could do quarterback design runs. You could run the RPO stuff. You can also make it certain that they can't really key in on a receiver because it's like, hey, we have to pay attention to everyone, right? You can't just drop everyone because Caden Salter can take off and run. He makes you adapt. He makes you change how you're defending this Colorado defense because Shedeur Sanders was mobile and he could run a little. That being said, Caden Salter is probably at worst the top 5 dual threat quarterback in the country. I'd say like guys like Avery Johnson are probably up there. Arch Manning, DJ Lagway. Who else? There's other names where I think he's in that mix, right? And Devin Dampier from Utah is supposed to be pretty good. So, Caden Salter changes things for Colorado, changes the landscape, and I think he really makes defenses' lives a bit harder. And I think if you're Colorado, that's what you want, right? You want to keep defenses on their toes, on their heels, and you don't want them to be able to key in on anything. And I think even though Colorado went 9-4 last season, they were predictable in the sense of like we knew they were going to be throwing the ball to over the middle to LeJonte West, or we knew that they were going to be trying to get Travis Hunter the ball in the out routes and stuff like that, or down the field, right? We knew that was going to happen. This year, it feels like a whole new ball game, and I think the Caden Salter, granted, it's only going to be a season probably, unless he has some extra COVID year of eligibility, which I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. I feel like we're getting towards the end of that. He's going to be a one and done at Colorado, so he's playing for a lot, right? He's playing for his career, right? A good year at Colorado, maybe he gets into some NFL consideration. A bad year, and maybe he gets replaced by Julian Lewis.
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
Does Cincinnati have any idea what it's walking into on Thursday night?
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast.
It is game day eve. It is Wednesday. We're just a little bit more than, or Tuesday. We're just a little bit, no, it's Wednesday. We're just a little bit more than 24 hours out from Nebraska's first game. And yes, believe it or not, there are still lingering questions. If you are one of our YouTube viewers, I am in a different place. Mitch asked me, what are you doing? Why are you in a different place? I can't really, I just got a wild hair and I started moving stuff around. And I want to see how this went. I'm getting a little mobile. You know, football season's coming up. Maybe we're doing pods from foreign locations coming up soon. So I wanted to stay nimble before the season starts. I'm in my basement.
Sometimes my wife does that where I just come home and like an entire room is rearranged. Yeah, it's kind of what's going on here on the show on this.
I like
Wednesday,
moving the couches from now and then. You know, just changing it up, getting a little new feng shui in there. So that's exactly what's going on with this. We have questions, still remaining questions before Nebraska's first game on Thursday night in Kansas City. In fact, we have 5 of them. 5 questions to prepare you best for Nebraska Cincinnati on Thursday night.
That's right. So this is it. This is the last go round with questions about the opener. On Thursday, we will have a show for your pregame viewing and listening enjoyment, and we will be making predictions about the 2025 season for Nebraska, and this season opener in particular. We'll probably also look at one game in the Big Ten and one game nationally. I wonder what that game, well, those could be the same games.
Yeah.
So we'll take a second game from the Big Ten because the national game is going to be Ohio State, Texas. And we'll give a pick on that. We're not going to go through a long list of picking all Big Ten games like we've done in the past. So, and special for you on this show, we have an abbreviated mailbag. So we said no mailbag this week because Friday is normally when we do it, and we're going to be reacting to Nebraska's season opening result. But a few of you still sent in questions, and we just felt like we needed to do something with that. So we've got that coming up in the final segment of this show. But first, 5 questions for Thursday night. Question number 1, as I teased in the cold open, does Cincinnati have any idea, Connor, what it's walking into as far as the Arrowhead environment? I'm not talking about the level of play that Nebraska is going to bring. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the Arrowhead environment and the possibility of 65,000 screaming Nebraska fans in what is reputed to be the loudest NFL stadium in America. It seems, well, I'll let you say what it seems like. Did you see Scott Satterfield's comments from Tuesday?
Yeah. My guess would be that he's trying to downplay it a little bit. Trying to tell us guys, come on, we played on the road before. It's not that big of a deal.
But he said it's going to be a neutral environment that doesn't favor either team.
Yeah, he knows that's not true. He's well aware. Cincinnati officials have been well aware who's buying the tickets to this game throughout this period of time. So he knows what it's going to sound like. And so my response to is Cincinnati ready for that? No, because I don't think he can be. Like I just don't think they can be. What impact might it have on the game? I don't know. Other than you walk in and you kind of get a little wide-eyed, but I think that might be the case for both teams. It's special. Yeah. It's unique. It's different. So does it have to work out as a positive for Nebraska? Not necessarily.
Oh, you're right. It could backfire.
Yeah. I think it's super duper unique. And when you bring 70,000 people to a game 3 hours down the road, there's a little bit of pressure that comes along with that too. So I don't think they're probably prepared for it. Maybe they're staying purposefully, blissfully ignorant. But I also don't know that it makes a huge difference.
That would be the concern if I was Scott Satterfield and I was playing this card where you act like it's a neutral site game. In name only, it is a neutral site game. And you have players on your team, because if he's doing the same thing behind closed doors that he's doing publicly, then when his players show up, and if, this is a big if momentum goes in favor of Nebraska at the beginning, that's when it gets really, really jarring for Cincinnati, because all of a sudden it's like a Chiefs game and the noise is reverberating off the metal in the stadium and it sounds like your worst nightmare if you're Cincinnati. It's kind of wild because it's not an enclosed stadium and it's not a 90,000 or 100,000 seat stadium like you see at some places in college football, yet it undeniably is as loud as you're going to find just about anywhere in America. So something about the Arrowhead acoustics could be really, really bad for the Bearcats, especially if they're not prepared for it. If you're going to Memorial Stadium at Nebraska, if you're going to LSU, if you're going to Clemson, whatever, Ohio State, you prepare for a road game. And I'm sure Cincinnati's using crowd noise back at home, but I don't know. Satterfield is just, I think, banking that his team can start well. If you start well and you take the crowd out of it, it's like the crowd at Ohio State last year when Nebraska played there. The whole second half, it was a total non-factor because Nebraska was moving the ball and had momentum and people were sitting on their hands. There were 100,000 of them, and it almost energized. It energizes the Nebraska fans.
Yep.
The Nebraska players, that they shut all those people up. So Cincinnati could find itself in that spot too, if it comes out and plays well, and all these people who are dressed in red and ready to explode in favor of Nebraska can't do it. So Yeah, it's an interesting topic and a dynamic that could work in a number of different ways.
Yeah, but ultimately, I mean, you mentioned it. It's about how well you play and how buttoned up you are. So I think that'll be obviously the biggest piece of the game. I just don't think that will play that much of a factor. Maybe Nebraska fans will take that as a challenge and they'll try to make it the loudest thing that's ever happened. But I don't know. We'll see.
I think it has the potential to be a huge factor. If Cincinnati gets backed into an end zone because of a penalty or a sack or something like that, and Sorsby can't communicate with his receivers and his offensive linemen, like I think it can be every bit as big of an advantage as what a Nebraska opponent faces walking into Memorial Stadium. And maybe, just maybe, if they're not prepared for it, it can be worse for Cincinnati because it's a season opener too.
Question number 2. This is assuming normal circumstances, right? You're not in an abnormal situation. Nebraska takes over on 1st and 10 on their own 25-yard line. Let's say they play the first possession of the game. Dana Holgerson's the offensive coordinator. How do you script the start? What do you want to do on the first possession to get yourself going a little bit and get everybody involved?
If my memory is correct, boy, the last time that Nebraska played at Arrowhead Stadium was in a Big 12 championship game against Oklahoma.
2006, yeah.
You got to go way back. And I think it fumbled the opening kickoff and then recovered it like inside the 5-yard line, and the field was frozen. So one of those two things will not happen on Thursday night. The field will not be frozen. But that's a situation where the script has to kind of go out the window. So we're talking here about, like you said, normal circumstances. How does Dana do this? You've probably been thinking about it for quite a while. What do you do to start the season? Are you riding Emmett Johnson? You gonna send a message and try to use that big offensive line, that powerful offensive line, and show who's the Big Ten team, the big physical team from the physical league? Or are you going to lean on what is the perceived strength of what is the strength of your quarterback and let him make some smart decisions and throw the ball around a little bit?
Yeah. So by the way, checking this out, I don't know what happened on the kickoff, but Nebraska started in that 2006 Big 12 championship game. Gosh, I don't remember this. That's a great call by you. They started the drive in their own 9. And on the first
turnover
play of the drive, they fumbled. Yeah. First play of the drive, they fumbled. Oklahoma scored less than a minute later and took a 7-0 lead, 50 seconds into the game. So that was not good. Yeah. That was not a good thing.
Yeah, there was a mistake on the kickoff return to start at the 9. It was like one of those oh no disaster moments right out of the gate. Yeah.
Oh no disaster. Okay, so let's not repeat that one again for Nebraska on Thursday. Yeah, I think Dana's going to do his thing. Like the thing that is awesome about him is that the calling of the plays, the sequential nature in which he does it, it just seems to come really naturally to him. Mm-hmm. I think this is the scripted part of the game. This is where, Satterfield was fine.
Pretty good.
Right. He was fine. So I think you really see the
Marcus Satterfield we're talking about.
Yes. Not Scott. Yes. Marcus, Nebraska's former offensive coordinator. So where you really get the benefits of having Dana Holgerson is throughout the remainder of the game. But I think they'll probably want to move with a little bit of pace. They'll want to move with a little bit of tempo. And I think they'll want to probably try and get everybody involved. Get Dylan some easy throws, get him in a rhythm. He's a rhythm guy. So I think they'll be hopefully a pretty good split in what they do from a run pass ratio. And, ideally you could go all the way down the field and score that thing in 10, 11, 12 plays. That would be a dream start for them.
I go back to Dana talking a lot this fall camp about routine plays and the importance of Nebraska just executing the routine plays, the 4 and 5 yard gains. And he feels that this is an offense that's set up to be able to do that well. And then if you lean on your opponent, the big one's going to come. Maybe you get 4 or 5 out of like 5 or 6 plays. You go 4 for 5 or 5 for 6 on getting routine gains to start a drive, and then boom, there's a 35-yard gain. Yep. And you're off. So I don't think they're going to go for something big at the beginning. I'll say they start with Emmett Johnson. Emmett Johnson's going to he's carrying the ball in the first play of the game, and pretty quickly, like on second down, no matter the situation, they're going to throw it. And who knows? Like, is Dylan going to look for Dane Key? Maybe, but tight end, Dane Key, Isaiah Hunt or something like that. You don't know until you see what the coverage is like. But
yeah,
that's my call for this.
Script some things to get some guys, going in the first, like 2, 3, 4 guys have catches on the first possession. Do
you get Ja'Cory Barney a touch on the opening possession? Like, do you scheme him a touch? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think so too. Yeah.
Find a way to get that guy the ball. He's electric.
August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Perhaps you believe the Green Bay Packers are going to win the Super Bowl this year, or maybe you have a division winner, dark horse you'd like to parlay. Maybe the Broncos and the Seahawks. You'd get some juicy odds on that if you wanted to do it. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bet now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast.
The big move of the day. The Falcons went out there and got their new right tackle. We talked about this on Monday. It was a TBD, to be determined, addition on the offensive tackle. And that, addition was former Seattle Seahawks right tackle Mike Jarrell, former 6th-round pick. The Falcons acquired him for a 2027 7th-round pick. So Terry did not give up another 2026 pick in order to get a new tackle. He gave up a 2027 pick. And of course, by the time we get to 2027, we'll only have 3 picks at that point in time. But hey, we'll worry about that later, right? Terry's like, I ain't gonna be here. So, as we've discussed, over the last week since Kaleb McGary went down with his injury on Wednesday, that this impending move that now we know is Mike Jarrell is really going to be the plan B to fill the Kaleb McGary void, right? Plan A is going to be Elijah Wilkinson, and plan B, you add a player like Mike Jarrell in the event that plan A doesn't work and Elijah Wilkinson struggles over the first part of the season. But the plan is probably, and it feels very likely that will continue to be based off of today's actions, that the Falcons plan is starting Elijah Wilkinson until Storm Norton comes back, which could be 4 to 6 weeks from now, longer or whatever. We know it will be at least week 5 at the earliest, because Storm Norton is going on IR, but we'll talk about that later. So if Wilkinson struggles between now and then Jarrell becomes a pivot point. As I've mentioned before, that's probably not going to be week 1. Maybe that's week 3. That gives Jarrell a month to get up to speed in this offense, which is the usual timeline that it usually takes to when you add a player before you can really count on them to make significant contributions. So it's like week 3, week 4, maybe week 5 is your sort of target date for Mike Jarrell. But in the meantime, it's going to be Elijah Wilkinson. And as we've said all along, the goal really for this move and any move that the Falcons were going to make was treading water, right? And, I've seen people express their disappointment that this isn't necessarily a home run trade for the Atlanta Falcons. And I feel like people's expectations were too high, right? I think a lot of people thought the Falcons were going to find some set it and forget it right tackle. And all of a sudden we were like, oh, the right tackle position is no longer going to be a worry for us. And that was never a realistic goal, right? And, I've seen people say, oh, there were better tackles available. And I'm like, who's better that's available than Mike Jarrell? There certainly are older tackles, more experienced tackles than Mike Jarrell, but you got to remember, you need to find somebody who actually has experience playing right tackle. And Jarrell has that 4 years as a starter in college at Findlay in Division II, 40 career starts at right tackle, 3 starts last year at that position. And I've seen a lot of people pushing for like the Cam Robinsons of the world and the Andre Dillards of the world that have no experience playing right tackle. And switching sides isn't easy. Penei Sewell, as talented a player as we've seen come into the NFL in the last 10, 20 years at the offensive tackle position, took 6 months to learn how to make the switch from left to right side. And that was one of the better, transitions that we've seen, one of the more successful transitions that we've seen. There was no realistic world where you could sign a left tackle and teach that guy to play right tackle in 2 weeks, right? And then you talk about scheme fit. And Jarrell is, at least in theory, we'll talk about that later, but in theory, is a scheme fit, right? In the outside zone scheme. Now, Seattle didn't run a ton of outside zone last year. They did switch to that with Clint Kubiak being their new offensive coordinator this year. And I've seen some various reports that, maybe Jarrell didn't necessarily fit quite, but he has the skills. I'm sorry, I was going to say schools. He has the skills and the tools to fit in an outside zone scheme because he's a good athlete. He can get on the move. I've seen him climb to the second level. So there's upside there. There's developmental upside for him to be a good fit in the scheme, even if it may take some time again to get him up to speed in it. And I've seen people suggesting right tackles that aren't scheme fits, right? At least in theory, Jarrell is. These guys that are purely gap guys, right? And you're sitting there saying, but Aaron, you've been talking about diversifying the run game. And it's like, yes, some diversifying the run game, some, right? It was never going to be a complete overhaul and a brand new scheme that the Falcons were going to run, switching away from an outside zone scheme. We've heard Zach Robinson say this, right? Going back to the beginning of August, right? We being, the preeminent Zach Robinson zealots. We monitor everything that he says. And he said, basically, we're sticking with our core foundation of wide zone. We're going to add some complements to get that going. We have some good mixers. And so the question has always never been, we're going to change the run scheme. It's what are those mixers? How many mixers are we going to have? Is it 5% new mixers or 25%? As I've said, 5% is basically you're playing lip service. You're not doing anything. 25% is actually potentially going to move the needle. We'll find out where that number is between 5 and 25%. But primarily the Falcons are going to remain an outside zone scheme. So this was never going to be a home run move that the Falcons were going to make. They kind of made this bed. Now they have to kind of lie in it when it comes to the offensive line depth. Because I remember back in March, I was listening to a podcast, a Daily Falcons podcast, but I can't quite remember the name. But I remember distinctly it was on a March 19th episode where that person who did this daily podcast was talking about how the Falcons' decision to run it back with the same backup offensive lineman was a clear sign of their complacency upon the offensive line. And, I believe this very same podcast, spent the 3 previous offseasons saying, hey, maybe the Falcons should draft an offensive tackle, and whoever hosts that podcast, right? Maybe they're too humble to admit it. But, that person seems to know a thing or two about ball. He's so humble that he won't even admit it. It was him that said it. He's just going to talk about himself in the third person. That's how humble that person is, but I would endorse listening to that podcast because it feels like whenever that person talks about anything related to football, it's relevant. You just don't know that it's going to be relevant. And so if you want to have a conversation about the team's previous complacency, which has been a through line, particularly the last 2 off seasons, right? And the team's decision to ignore or neglect problems in March that are discussed on this, so humble, illustrious podcast, right? That always seem to come back to bite them in August, and they're scrambling in August to add players at these positions that they ignore in March. Yeah, we could absolutely have that conversation. But in the meantime, I'm content with the Jarrell move. It's not necessarily something that's going to guarantee success in the short term. Maybe it's an upgrade over guys like Norton and Wilkinson. There's a decent chance he could be. He's got more upside than those guys do, given that he's young and developing. But, it also has some potential long-term impact, right? I think this is a reasonably good bet that the Falcons are making, given the circumstances, right? We know McGarry's going to be back in 2026, but beyond that, who knows, right? That's the last year where his contract is guaranteed. Jarrell's still on his rookie deal, second year of his rookie deal. As a former 6th-round pick last year, that means he's signed through the 2027 season. So if you can develop him behind McGarry for the next 2 years, and again, whatever happens this year, maybe, just maybe, he could be a long-term replacement for Caleb McGarry, 2+ years from now. And you only gave up a 2027 7th-round pick in order to do that. So I sit here and I say, Terry, not bad. Good job, Terry. So in the long term, this could be looking really good in 2 or 3 years. It could be looking really good in 2 or 3 months, or it could be looking really terrible. Again, you never know with the Atlanta Falcons.
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
Max Strus needed foot surgery, and that's going to delay the start of his season.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
The Cleveland Cavaliers were in the news on Tuesday because it was announced that Max Strus is going to be out for 3 to 4 months before he resumes basketball activity because he had to undergo a surgery on Tuesday to repair what is called a Jones fracture. Now, I will read the full statement from the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then we'll dive into what this means, what this is, and just everything that I know so far. So, statement reads as follows. The Cleveland Cavaliers forward Max Strus underwent successful surgery today, again, Tuesday, to repair a Jones fracture, which is the 5th metatarsal in his left foot, suffered recently during an off-season training. The procedure was performed by Dr. David Porter in consultation with Cavaliers team physician Dr. James Rosnick at Fort Sports Medicine and Orthopedics in Indianapolis. Strus is expected to resume basketball activities in approximately 3 to 4 months. His status will be updated as appropriate. Obviously, this is a blow to the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is not the end of the world for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I do think that is something that needs to be pointed out. I saw on the internet, which of course is not a real place, but I saw on the internet on Tuesday, a lot of people freaking out. Listen, this is an injury. It sucks that it happens, but I think if you are the Cavs, if you are Max, if you're everybody involved here, you would prefer that this happened now as opposed to this happened in February. This, to me, I don't think it's something that should affect how we look at the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think that as of right now, this injury does not change what their goals should be. This injury does not change what their expectations should be. This injury, it changes what they'll look like on opening night. No question. It changes what they'll look like for the first few months of the season because you go play that timeline game, right? Like it is right now as I record this, 10 o'clock on August 26th. So you go 1 month from now, September 26th, 2 months from now, October 26th. The season has started at that point. 3 months from now is right around Thanksgiving, November 26th. That is the earliest, according to this release, that Max Strus will return to game activity, which I think is an important thing to note, but will return to basketball activity. 4 months, of course, would be the day after Christmas. So to me, this seems as if Max Strus will not play in 2025. It seems to me like he will probably return, of course, and every recovery is different, but it seems like his return to game action will probably come in early 2026. And that is not that big of a deal for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, what I know about Max Strus's injury is, one, I am a little bit uniquely qualified to talk about this because I had this surgery twice. So as a little bit of backstory to me, I played college football, went to a Division II school named Lake Erie College out in Painesville, Ohio. I played wide receiver and I had this injury twice. I had this surgery 2 times while I was in college, and the way the surgery works, I was not in Max's surgery. I've not seen x-rays, but just my best guess as to the way this surgery works is that because it's that 5th metatarsal, which is all the way on the outside of your foot. So if let's pretend that my hand is a foot, the break is right here, basically on your pinky. That is where the bone would be broken. My guess is that the doctors went in and they put a screw in to his foot to keep that bone, to stabilize that bone together so that it can heal. And they potentially also may have taken a bone graft from somewhere else, possibly his ankle, and wrapped it around to further strengthen that bone and promote just a little bit more healing. I've had the surgery done both ways. The way in which the bone was wrapped around it certainly proved to be better because I've had no issues since in the decade plus at this point since my most recent foot surgery. But that said, this is something that can kind of just happen. From what I was told, Max was injured during a 1-on-0 basketball workout. This was not, he didn't step on somebody's foot and turn an ankle. This was a non-contact thing. And this can happen partially because you might have a stress reaction in that foot. I know how it happened for my first one. I had a stress reaction in my left foot, and I was running sprints at football workouts, and one day my foot just snapped. The bone just snapped. I don't know if that's exactly how it happened with Max, but I don't think that should be some surprising thing, certainly given my experience. And we have seen other guys in the NBA that have dealt with this. We've seen other guys in sports that have dealt with this. Kevin Durant had this injury way back when he was with Oklahoma City. I believe Des Bryant, then of the Dallas Cowboys, had this injury at a certain point. This is an injury that it sucks. Like, there's not a good way to really heal from it, because if you think about the way your foot is set up, and I was not anticipating this podcast being as, medically focused, I guess, as it is, but there's not a lot of blood circulation to that part of your foot. So this can be a little bit of a slow healing process. I would anticipate Max is probably going to be non-weight bearing for a little while here. It'll probably be on crutches and a walking boot, maybe even in a cast for a little bit. But I don't think that this is going to be something that lingers. I do look at this. If you want to look at the bright side, when Max is back, provided there are no setbacks throughout his recovery, which of course they happen. It's not necessarily anybody's fault if that does happen. But if there are no setbacks through his recovery process, and let's say we get to that 4-month mark and Max Strus is starting to ramp up and he's getting close to being on the floor again, this is something that when he starts playing, and of course there will be an adjustment period and he will have to work himself back into shape. And that's because, when you have an injury like this, he's not going to be able to run for a few months. Like, that is going to be the biggest part of this. But this isn't an injury like a torn muscle or a torn ligament, where there can be a pretty big adjustment period or risk of re-injury. I don't look at this injury as that type of thing. I think that once this is healed, it'll most likely be healed. And I think that is one of the things that is a good sign with this injury, that if you want to look at the bright side of it, and of course, you never want to see somebody get injured, but the fact that it happened now is much better than it happening in February, where then he would miss the rest of the regular season and potentially the playoffs for the Cavaliers. And two, I do think this is an injury where, yes, you can re-injure it. No injury has a 100% success rate, but I don't think that this is going to be something that is that big of an issue moving forward. And I just do think, too, it's worth bringing up. The Cavs started last season without Max Strus. Remember, he didn't play a game until December 20th. That was his first game that he played last year. I believe it came against the Milwaukee Bucks. And you might remember that the Cleveland Cavaliers were pretty good in that time. They were 23-4 in the 27 games that Max Strus missed to begin the season. And they were good when Max was on the floor. They were good when Max was off the floor. And this is not trying to diminish the value that Max Strus brings, because I do ultimately think the Cavaliers are a better team when Max Strus is playing basketball for them, when he's available for them. I think they are a better team with Max Strus than without Max Strus. But last year when Max played, they went 39-11, which is a very, very good record. Last year when Max Strus did not play, they went 25-7, and a big chunk of those games came to start the season. And even that is a little bit misleading, because two of the losses that the Cavs had without Max Strus came in the last week of the season. One was the final regular season game where they lost in overtime to the Indiana Pacers. Maybe double overtime. I think it was actually double overtime. So they lost that game, which truthfully, nobody else played. If you look at that, Jared Allen played, I think it was 40 seconds to ensure that he played in all 82 games, but that was a game in which none of the Cavs regulars played. And they also lost the other game they played to Indiana near the end of the regular season, where many of their starters didn't play. It wasn't everybody didn't play, but a lot of guys did not play. And if you think back, that was, I believe Sam Merrill had a great game, or maybe it might have been somebody else that had a great game that game, but they almost beat the Pacers starters, despite the fact that really none of the Cavs starters other than Jared Allen, I believe, played in that game. So for all intents and purposes here, they were 25-5 when Max Strus didn't play last year. Again, this is not to diminish his value, because like I said, I think the Cavs are a better team when Max Strus is on the floor as opposed to when Max Strus is hurt and not available. But I don't think this is the end of the world. You could make an argument that the depth in the backcourt is really going to be tested because not only is Max going to miss the start of the season, but I think it is at this point probably fair to assume that Darius Garland is not suiting up opening night. I think the Cavs would probably be in their best interest to not rush him back from his own offseason foot surgery that he had a 4 to 5 month timeline that happened earlier in June. So maybe the backcourt depth will be tested. I think that's a very fair thing to point out, but I don't think that this should be viewed as the end of the world or like DEFCON 1 for the Cavs. I think that, yes, it's an injury. It's an unfortunate injury, but it's something that does come at the right time if it has to happen. And the one final stat I'll point out as far as things go with Max having to miss time and it not being the end of the world. So last year, the Cleveland Cavaliers outscored opponents by 7.8 points per 100 possessions with Max Strus on the floor. This is according to Cleaning the Glass. So they had a net rating of plus 7.8 when Max Strus played on the floor for them. When Max Strus was not on the floor, so this does include that games he did not play in at all, also when he's sitting on the bench in a game that he's active in. The Cavaliers were plus 10.8 per 100 possessions. So there is an argument. Again, I don't subscribe to the Cavs being better without Max Strus. I don't subscribe to that. But there's an argument to be made that they have other ways they can attack teams and that they can be just as, if not more effective when they don't have Max. And I think if you want to look at the bright side, that is certainly part of it.